Once again, this comes from Wayne Grudem's book called Systematic Theology, An Introduction to Biblical Doctrine. Someone asked me if it was readable. Probably for some. Depends. It's kind of like the translations of the Bible. The New American Standard translation of the Bible that I was raised with can be understood by people that have a 12th grade education, and then they kind of rank them based on your education level. That's understandability. The NIV would be a little bit lower. You know, I'm not disparaging. I'm just saying that vocabulary is different, and so Wayne Grudem was probably readable for most. But anyway, we're going to try to summarize it for you. All right, so we have a definition of demons. Here we go. Demons are evil angels who sinned against God and who now continually work evil in the world. And I would underline that word continually. They are evil angels who sinned against God and who now continually work evil in the world. All right, let's break it down. All right, so where do they come from? The origin of demons. The origin of demons. Well, what we know is letter number 1 there, but somewhere between the events of Genesis 1:31 and 3:1, there was a rebellion. All right, so what was Genesis 1:31? God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was good. Now, we talked last time we were together about angels. They are created beings. So everything that God created, God said was good. Everything. All right, so even the angels, of course, were good. They were perfect. All right, now, when we come to 3:1, Genesis chapter 3, verse 1, what happens? The serpent was more crafty than all of the beasts of the field that the Lord God had made. So here comes Satan, this serpent, and it gives me shivers as I'm up here on this platform tonight. That's ridiculous, this serpent thing that we had to endure. Anyway, right? It's the only animal God cursed. He took his legs off. Anyway, somewhere between 1:31 and 3:1, there is a rebellion. Don't know timeline, don't know any of that. We do know that in the timeline of Genesis, somewhere there is a rebellion. That's what number 1 says. What was the rebellion? Turn, if you would. I'm going to get you to use your Bible tonight a little bit. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. There was a rebellion, and that rebellion involved sin. Sin is rebellion, right? Always. But 2 Peter 2, verse 4, we get this word. 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4. For if God did not spare angels, there's the word, created beings by God, when they what? They sinned. So there are angels who sinned. God did not spare them. He cast them into hell. Turn to Jude, to the right. A couple books. Jude. 1 chapter, so we're just going to verse 6. Jude 1 and verse 6. The angels, there's that word again, who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling. So there is a group that left the authority of God. And they did not stay where God created them to stay. In their own sin, they rebelled. And God has kept them in eternal change under gloomy darkness. And we can talk about, that's not all of them, obviously, but they're a portion of them, okay? Now, Isaiah chapter 14 gives us the definitive conversation that triggered all this between Satan and God. Isaiah chapter 14. Isaiah 14. Verse 12. God speaking to Satan, describing Satan. Isaiah 14, verse 12. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. how you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. You said, I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you're brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. You see what Satan's doing, right? So he is setting himself up in opposition, in rebellion, in sin against God by desiring authority over God. So somewhere between Genesis 1:31 and 3:1, there was a rebellion in heaven, and the angels sinned against God. This is their origin. This is where they come from. Number two, I don't know necessarily the connection between what we're talking about their origin, but we're going to deal with it because it does deal with something that we have a question with in the Bible. All right? Angels are non-material. We talked about that when we talked about angels. They're not material beings. They're spiritual beings. And according to Matthew chapter 22, they do not marry. Demons are fallen angels. Angels do not marry. Well, brother, what's that got to do with this? Well, there is a discussion in Genesis chapter 6, verse 2. Right before God wipes out the entire world through a flood, Genesis 6 is where God is sorry that he made man on the earth. And in Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, we have this verse that we struggle to understand. Genesis 6:2, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. What is that? I have taught, just out of my own, my own uncertainty, but one option is that there was a mingling of spiritual alien-type Nephilim who intermarried with the humans' daughters of men. So now there is a race that was demonic and human. Because some theologians teach that this was the sons of God, and in Genesis 6:2 were the Nephilim, and they were demonic creatures. Wayne Grudem says that can't be, because fallen angels can't marry. And so he's making the distinction. That description in Genesis 6:2, the sons of God and the daughters of men, could not have been spiritual and human connections. I appreciate the point. It does not mean that they could not, in my mind, still doesn't mean that they couldn't cross the line and it couldn't have happened. He maintains that there is several passages of Scripture that say, for instance, Deuteronomy 14, verse 1, and it's in your parentheses there, Deuteronomy 14, verse 1, the sons of the Lord your God there are men in the Bible. Deuteronomy 14:1 is one place that describes the sons of God as humans, right? And so he's saying that Genesis 6:2 was just humans, and humans are all humans. They're men and women, not demonic activity. I don't know, truthfully. But this is the way, because we're walking through his stuff, he explains that demons are angels. Angels do not marry, according to Jesus in Matthew chapter 22. And so they could not have been demons that were mentioned in Genesis 6:2. Let me tell you something. I got a lot to do, and I got a lot to study, and I got a lot going on. I ain't going to get bogged down in this, okay? All right? Maybe we could, if you want to, we could have a discussion and we could walk through it together. But it's not integral to the gospel message, right? It's not. But it's an interesting question that we really don't know answers to. We may not know till we get to heaven. But anyway, I wanted to point that out, all right? So now let's talk about Satan himself. Satan as the head of the demons, all right? So you have this demonic group. They are headed by Satan. Look at the word Satan there, number one. He is the head of the demons. And then I want you to know notice this part. He is God's what? He's God's enemy. Hey, we know this, but I want you to remember this. If you're on God's team, who's your enemy? This is not a biblical thing out here in the book of the Bible. This is today. He's your enemy. Everything he does opposes God. All the way back. All right, so Job chapter 1, verse 6. You don't have to turn to all these. Job 1:6. There was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. Now, there's that phrase, sons of God. Who came to present themselves before the Lord in Job chapter 1, verse 6? The sons of God. Were those angels or were those demons? I don't know. But I do know this. The rest of that verse says, and Satan came with them. And the rest of that is Satan's got a job that he wants to do on Job. Why? Because he was an upright man. 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 1. I like this one in the sense that it describes Satan in a very characteristic way. Satan stood against Israel and incited David to number Israel. Satan's entire desire was to stand against Israel. Why? Because they're God's people. Zechariah chapter 3, verse 1. He showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. You see this picture in Zechariah 3? Here is Joshua, the high priest. He's standing next to the angel of the Lord, and right there is Satan, who is there to accuse Joshua, the high priest. Hey, guys, don't think he won't do that to you, right? We know that. He's the accuser of the brethren. And so Satan is not only the leader of the demons, but everything he does as the leader of the demons is to oppose anything that God has going on, including you and including me. Other names for Satan we have in the Bible. Let's go to Revelation 12, verse 9. Let's go to that one because it gives several names that summarize most of these that are listed here. Revelation chapter 12, and we'll go to Revelation 12 and Revelation 20. Let's read these because they give multiple names for Satan. Revelation 12 and Revelation 20. Revelation 12 and verse 9. As I said, it will summarize several of these. The great dragon, there's one word for him. The great dragon was thrown down. The ancient, what? Serpent, who is called the devil, and there's one other description, right? The deceiver of the whole world. He's busy. This is who he is. He was thrown down to earth, and the angels were thrown down with him. Revelation chapter 20, turn there. Another list of the names of Satan, Revelation 20 and verse 2. He sees the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan. All right? He's also called in Matthew chapter 10 and Matthew chapter 12 and Luke chapter 11. Matthew 10, Matthew 12, Luke 11, he's called Beelzebul. John 12 and John 14, he's called the ruler of this world. The ruler of this world. Do you struggle with that? Because I thought God was in charge. Right? Well, God in his, and we'll see this in a moment, God in his wisdom and in his sovereignty has allowed Satan certain parameters by which he can operate. And he can operate in the parameter of this world. And so, in the sense that he has control or sway over, he's the ruler of this world. And if you don't think he has control or sway over this world, you don't watch the news. Or you don't even pay attention to what goes on around you, right? Satan has control, he has rule over the hearts and minds of men, and we'll see that in just a moment. He is called the prince of the power of the air in Ephesians chapter 2, who is at work in the sons of disobedience. In Matthew 13 and 1 John 2, he's called the evil one. He's called the evil one. All right? These are just some names that the Bible gives for Satan, all all synonymous with who he is, but they all give their own descriptions, right? The words have meaning in the Bible, and so they describe his activity, which will lead to letter C, the activity of Satan and demons. What do they do? Well, we've touched on some of it. Number one, we know this, that Satan was the originator of sin. Satan was the originator of sin. 2 Corinthians 11:3 you have listed on your sheet there. The serpent deceived Eve by his cunning and led her astray. John 8:44, perhaps you can quote this one. John 8:44. You ever wonder why the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes all wanted to kill Jesus? It was because of statements like this. Hey guys, you're of your father the devil. No, our father's Abraham. No, your father is the devil. And your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he does not stand in the truth because there's no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. You get that point? The father of lies is the originator of lies, and he was a murderer from when? From the beginning. So it was Satan who was the originator of sin. Now, 1 John 3:8. Why don't you turn there? 1 John chapter 3 and verse 8. 1 John chapter 3, verse 8. John, in his first letter, gives us some tests. Have you ever wondered if you were a Christian? John gives us a series of tests that we can take to know whether or not we're believers. And in the middle of that discussion, 1 John 3, verse 8, he talks about, you constantly are making a practice. It is your habit to willfully disobedient. You're willfully disobedient to the Lord. And he says, whoever makes a practice of sinning is what? You're not of God, you're of the devil. For the devil has been sinning since what? From the beginning. And so God appeared to destroy his works, all right? Number two, along those lines, and I've already mentioned it, number two, demons oppose and try to destroy every work of God. Demons oppose and try to destroy every work of God. Hey, turn if you would to 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4. I think this is enlightening and insightful as to what you see going on around you. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4. In their case, the God of this world has what? He's blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from what? Seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ. That's why we're here, right? Go into all the world and share the what? The gospel, the good news. And what does it say about what's going on in our work? Satan is working against it. He's blinding the eyes of anyone that you try to approach. Every single human being without Christ is blinded, and they're not blinded of their own doing. Satan has blinded their eyes. And so any work that we try to do is going to be opposed, right? Any work that you try to do. This is what he does. This is who he is. He's done this from the very beginning, the Bible says. You can go all the way back. Genesis 6. God was sorry that he made man, and so he wiped out the earth except for what? One family. God had a plan. Because if you go back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, what did God curse Satan when he cursed him and took his legs off and all that stuff? He says, listen to me, someone is coming who will crush you. From Eve, this woman, someone is coming. And he knew that. And so the entire existence from the time of history was, I have to destroy this person. I don't know who it is. But God always has a people, right? And so God spared Noah, Abraham, Isaac. Isaac, the promised child. Abraham didn't have any children. 70 years old, no children. For Rebekah.. And then she has the only child. This is the one. This is the one that God's going to use. And what happens? God says, hey, go kill it. Wait a second, God, are you sure? Yeah, I have a plan. But in that moment was testing. But here's what we do. We get to the book of Esther, one of the most beautiful books in all the Bible. Does not use the word God anywhere in it. But God's all over it. I was at a store on Monday, and they had a guy come in. They paid to wash the windows at this storefront. And, you know, I mean, he's got the squeegee and all the, you know, that cool stuff they do. And because you may not know who put those marks there, but you know those marks are there, right? You got kids, right? And then Maria accuses me. Hey, what'd you do? Why'd you touch the door? Why'd you touch the glass, right? You don't know when it happened. You don't know who did it, but you know that it's there. The book of Esther is this way, right? The book of Esther is this way. You don't know that God was there, but you see God all over it. So you have this woman, Esther, who was taken in a beauty contest to be the king's wife, one of many. And then she overheard of what? A plot by Mordecai to destroy all the Jewish people, every one of them. By Haman. Her uncle Mordecai says, hey, Esther, I can't speak to the king. He's going to kill us. You have to go. And then she said that famous line, but I can't go. And he says this famous line, what? Who knows that God may have put you here for what? For such a time as this. And so she goes. And what was going on? Satan was going to wipe out the entire nation of Israel. Why? Because the Messiah was coming. And he said, I will wipe it out. I'm going to oppose everything that God does. When Jesus is born, what does King Herod do? He orders the murder of every child under 2 in the town of Bethlehem. Who does that? Satan. Why does he do that? Because he's opposing the work of God. I don't know where he is, but I'm going to destroy him and I'm going to wipe him out. So this is what Satan does. Christian, this is what he does in your life. He opposes everything of God in your life. Everything. All right. Here's the good news, number 3. Yet, demons are limited by God's control and have limited power. We go back to the book of Job when we have this interaction. We don't have very many interactions between Satan and God that we see in the Bible, but Job is one that we go to and study. Job 1, hey, the Lord says, hey, you can have him, but don't kill him. Right? So, it didn't seem to Job that Satan had any limits, but he did, because God said, hey, you can only do this much, right? Spare his life. Hey, James 4:7 is one that's listed there. Does anybody know what James 4:7 says? Submit yourselves, therefore, to God and do what? Resist the devil and what? He will flee from you. So by implication, James is telling us that Satan doesn't have some power. Now, I would caution you about chanting that verse a lot. It's in the Bible. I got it. I'll tell you this. You're not stronger than Satan. You better be standing in the Lord on that before you start rebuking Satan. All right? You better be. You better be girded up. You better have girded your loins. I just think sometimes we use that pretty flippantly. This is Satan we're talking about. But we do know that he has to flee. So it's a good study to go back on. Not trying to get into that tonight. Okay? Hey, turn your page over. It's an interesting thing. I think sometimes we may not understand this. There's 2 notes there that I want you to pay attention to. 2 notes. And I tell you what, I've probably been guilty of this. What does the word omniscient mean? All right, omni is everywhere, all. Omniscient means all-knowing, knows everything. Omnipresent means everywhere. Omnipotent means all-powerful. So omniscient means that someone knows everything. Who is omniscient? Is anyone else omniscient? No, because God, that's one of the attributes of God that makes him separate from you. You and I are made in the image of God, but there are attributes of God that we're not. And that's one of them. We're not omniscient. He is. It's what makes him God. So, if we tend to land on this thought that Satan and the demons know everything, then you're putting them on the level with God. Don't do that. They don't know everything. But what they do have the ability to do is they do have the ability to look, apparently, from about 30,000 feet and to see our habits and to see our practices, right? They do know that. They're observing. They're everywhere. And they know, hey, you can get Eric in some traffic, he's going to act a fool, right? Right? You get Eric, I went to Wendy's today about 2:30, and I'm thinking, hey, we're in between lunch and dinner. I'm going right in, get me some hamburger patties, and I'm walking right back out. They're backed up to the door, almost out the door. And I'm steady shaking my head. I'm like, really? You know, they know. They're observing. They know what pushes you, right? Not omniscient, but observant. So read the notes here. We should not think that demons can know the future or read our minds. God alone knows the future. But demons can observe what goes on in the world and probably draw conclusions from their observations, right? It's a classic sociology thing. You study the behavior of people, you know how they're going to respond. We know that. That's why we got to walk in the power of the Spirit, right? All right. Real quickly, we're going to end on number 4, and then next week we'll talk about our relationship to demons. And you see those questions there. Are demons active in the world today? On the next page, can a Christian be demon-possessed? Can they? The answer to that is no, by the way. They cannot be demon-possessed. How can we recognize demonic influences? And we'll ask some of those questions next week. All right, so just real quickly, a timeline of how we see demons and their activity in the Bible. And so we want to break it down. He breaks it down. We begin in the Old Testament. We do not see a lot other than the book of Job and a couple of other places. In the life of the King Saul, we see some demonic spirits that come, but we don't necessarily know all that happened. See, we're not going anywhere anyway. It's pouring down rain. So in the Old Testament, we don't see an instance of casting out demons. Occasionally we see a worship of demons. Point being, there's not a big explanation / understanding that we get from the Old Testament as it relates to demons, other than the ones that are listed in those parentheses there, and as I mentioned, the book of Job. All right? But when we come to letter B, we come to the ministry of Jesus, what happens? It becomes very evident. All right? Jesus asserts immediately his power and his authority over demonic activity. We see many times him casting out demons. We see many times him immediately, right, in the wilderness. He's opposing Satan in the wilderness, and we find this constant battle between Jesus and demonic powers. And it's very clear in the life of Jesus that who has power over them, right? What do they say? Hey, Master, they cried out from the pigs, right? Hey, they cried out from the man. Hey, throw us into the pigs. They knew. So it's very evident in the life of Jesus that there's activity, and it's very evident in the life of Jesus that he has authority over them. Now, when we come to the early church, the New Covenant age, in Matthew 10, Luke chapter 10, Jesus had given authority to his disciples to cast out demons. Now, this also goes back to this whole discussion we had about cessationism, and does God still give us that authority now? I'm not getting into all that, but he did, we know, give the apostles the authority to do this. And so we find early on in the book of Acts that the apostles had authority and did on occasion cast out demons from people. Okay? The next thing that we discuss, we find in the book of Revelation. During the millennium, we find that this activity, this rule, this reign, this power that Satan has begins to come to an end, doesn't it? And during this 1,000-year reign, Satan is bound. He and his demons are bound, right? They do not have authority during this 1,000-year reign of Christ and this 1,000-year reign of the church. And they do not have authority. They're bound for that 1,000 years, all right? So they're temporarily restrained. And then ultimately, when we get to Revelation chapter 20, at the final judgment, what? They're punished, they're destroyed forever and ever. All right? So that's kind of the arc of demonic activity in the Bible. There's an increasing understanding of it, particularly when we get to the time of Jesus. There is a quietness of them in the millennium, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And then ultimately, Revelation chapter 20, they are destroyed. But until then, what? You and I have to deal with them. Well, Merry Christmas to you, Brother Eric. Thank you for that encouraging, enlightening sermon tonight. I have needed and been blessed by these Psalms of Lament more than you. And I'm not bragging when I say that. I'm not trying to one-up you. I pray the Lord used them in your life. I needed them. So I chose them at the beginning, at the end of the spring. I chose the ones I wanted to preach from. And so there's, I mentioned that 2/3 perhaps of the psalm collection of psalms is Psalms of Lament. So there was many to choose from, and I only had 6 to choose. And this is week 5, and so I chose Psalm 88. I had no reason why, other than I graduated in 1988. I don't know any other reason. That's not spiritual. But, no. Chose Psalm 88. Well, 2 weeks ago, I got to study in Psalms 88 to prepare. You know what I found right off the bat? It's the darkest, most depressing psalm in all the Bible. I'm like, great. I can't wait to study this one. This is going to be great, right? Man, you need to be here Sunday. This is my message. What do you do? As a matter of fact, one commentary said this is called an end-of-life psalm. He's done. He's done. What do you do when you don't know what to do? This is good. It's good. What do you do when you don't know what to do? 3 things. Keep wailing. Keep walking. Keep worshiping. When you don't know what to do and you're at the end, what do? You keep crying out to God. You keep walking and you keep worshiping. That's good. And we need that. And then I'm going to conclude. This is where I'm getting at with this. I'm going to conclude with the John Piper quote that I read. Listen to me. If all we got on Sunday morning were feel-good sermons, how would we ever know how to deal when the bottom drops out? If all you got were feel-good sermons, how would you ever know how to handle the dark days? I believe that. So, if all you're doing is living in this fantasy world, how do you know who your enemy is, right? We need to know. We need to know what his plan and his purpose is. We need to know how he affects us, right? So I don't apologize for this. It's in the Bible, and we need to deal with it. So it's actually been encouraging to me to read these things, all right? Well, we might want to run in between showers, but let's do this. We've not done this in a while. Do you think we need chairs in the choir loft? We've been asked to come move some chairs, but I don't think we need them, do we? We can tough it out. There's going to be a men's choir, but we're not. We stood last year. Yeah, we're not going to fool with that. Actually, the text I got from Caden was the dude choir. All right, so the dude choir is going to stand, but we'll be all right. So, all right, what I want you to do, though, is I want you to pray. Just briefly, all right, briefly. If you have to introduce yourself to somebody around you, but I want you to pray. Maybe you got a prayer request, go around the circle, but I want one person to pray, just one. Share your heart, but then I want you to pray, and then we will be dismissed quietly when you are done.